Elaine Miller Bond is the author of The Pupfish Hero, who found bravery and buckets and saved a species, a biography of courageous and compassionate fisheries biologist Edwin Phil Pister. She is the author and photographer of Wild Colors of the West, Running Wild, and Living Wild, fun kids' books that celebrate wildlife and wild places. She did the photography for the scientific book, The Utah Prairie Dog by Dr. Theodore Mano, and wrote the foreword for his second book, Swamp Rat. Her photographs have appeared on Discovery Channel Canada, and her publishing credits include Science, BBC Earth News, The American Naturalist, and Scholastic, My Big World with Clifford, Bay Nature Magazine, and other environmental outlets. And I'm really impressed to have somebody who does science writing put Clifford in her biography. I think that's seriously cool. She got her start as senior science writer for the University of California Natural Reserve System, which she will happily talk about tonight. Bond grew up far from the pupfish near Berkeley, California, and recently moved to wildly inspiring Bellingham, Washington, where 5 Pacific salmon species have been documented running through town. That must be quite a sight. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction, Cole. That was really lovely. I want to thank everybody for being here. I would like to thank the Mono Basin Historical Society and Museum, located in beautiful Lee Vining, California, just on the eastern beautiful side of Yosemite. Dave, Carl, and Janet, thank you. Richard, Foy, thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge the people who came today. I've got friends, neighbors here in Washington, family in California, Oregon, and Phil's daughter is here tonight from Utah. And I've even got friends from Germany here today, a professor who helped me get my start and my first book published in Germany, and Jordan, where it's 5 a.m. Eat. Gosh, John. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and share screen now, and just, there's a lot of ground I kind of want to cover.
You recorded, darling.
Fine, I'll walk in the 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I can't prove you, fine, thank you.
Is everything okay? Okay. Wait. Sorry, Adobe Bridge. I just want to start the slideshow here.
Yeah, somebody out there needs
Here's
to.
why we're here. Thank you again, everybody, for coming. As you know, the Pupfish Hero was published just really recently, last year, by the Eastern Sierra Land Trust. And I do understand that there are blizzards happening, and there's been some scary stuff happening in the Sierra Nevada, Eastern Sierra. So thank you for coming tonight. I just want to start by also saying that today is a very auspicious day. It's Read Across America Week. And just earlier today, I had the pleasure of reading in a 3rd grade classroom in Riverside Public Elementary School in San Pablo, California, by Zoom. It's really important to remember these kids. I remember one of the things that Phil always talked about was that kids care and kids were hope for the future. And I think that's why he was willing to work with me about kids. When I would read my little books for children in TK and pre-K in Hunters Point, San Francisco, they would open the floor to questions. And the kids' questions would be things like, I saw a shark, or my dog sniffed a butterfly. And to me, that's the perfect question. It shows that they care. And who likes books? This was a book festival in San Pablo, California. The whole family came out celebrating books and literacy. People love stories. children of all ages. They brought their grandparents. It was a beautiful day. And one thing I do when I'm writing for kids is I'm always thinking about them. I always think about who I'm writing to. A little bit about me. I'm a science writer and a photographer. This is my website. I'm often known as the person with the fox on her card. I got my start, as we spoke about, at the UC Natural Reserve System at the Office of the President in beautiful downtown Oakland, as my best friend and editor liked to say. She's here as well in Bellingham, Washington. And we wrote, one of my main responsibilities was writing this periodical. So it was, the audience obviously is not children, it's educated lay people, but you'll see that I have done profiles of biologists before in my experience. This is one of my our dearest reserve managers of blessed memory, Barbara Carlson. One thing I learned is not to listen to people. A couple things people always told me. You'll never make a living as a writer. I heard that in high school. You're ahead in writing, but you'll never make a living as a writer. Thank goodness my first professional job out of undergrad was as a writer, or editor, then became a writer. And also, if it sounds good, it can't be science. And I always thought that it was just perfectly fine to make science sound fun. A bird in the hand is worth banding. And she's actually banding a tiny hummingbird there. How many hummers can you mail with a first-class stamp? This was one of my favorites. Millennium Falcons. This is when the peregrine falcon was downlisted in the year 2000. The article I wrote about that. I went on, as we talked about, to do photography and writing independently. And I very serendipitously got to meet Dr. John Hoagland from the University of Maryland when I was camping for the first time in Bryce Canyon, Utah. And one thing led to the other, and I ended up doing the photography for his book. It was actually written by Dr. Theodore Mano, who was a PhD candidate at the time at the field site when I did the photography. And as we said before, I went ahead and I was asked to write the foreword to Dr. Mano's second book, Swamp Rat. I'm trying to find where I am here. That's my page a little. This was a highlight here, of course, having my photos appear in the journal Science. They're in the graphs down there. And I just, after the prairie dog photography, which was in 2005 for some months, I went ahead and just really loved wild animals and photography. And I kept working on different images and stories. One thing I kind of started for myself was to pitch wildlife stories to Berkeley Side, which was the news site for the city of Berkeley. In my mind, the wonders and beauty are everywhere, even in the city. And children can have a thrill of wonder and nature in the city as well. And nature and wonder and beauty are accessible to all. And this was probably my most popular article. It kind of went viral, breaking the story about the first time clustering monarchs were documented at Berkeley's Aquatic Park. Within the first 2-3 days, it got 21,000 shares on Facebook. Here's another one, Warm and Fuzzy, Sweetness and Light, Diary from a Hummingbird's Nest. This was a mom building her nest and raising her little babies literally an arm's length from restaurants and shops near downtown Oakland. So we go from the warm and sweet and popular to the not so popular, or what we can call misunderstood wildlife. I really wanted to promote bats, and these are non-releasable education bats that I photographed in my kitchen with the cat in the other room. Curious cat in the other room. Oh, and by the way, last year, this was published some time ago, but last year I got an email from a California state senator that a young girl, I think around 4th grade, had initiated a Senate bill to make the pallid bat the California state bat. So a golden bat for the Golden State. And so I was happy to help in some way with that. And that's that little guy there on the left. We go from the not so popular to the very unpopular. One thing about writing for the University of California Natural Reserve System, it was all traditional publishing on paper. You know, we went to press, there was an offset printer, etc. And things, you got vetted when you wrote. This is a completely different society, writing when you've got comment threads at the end. And boy, there were some nasty, nasty comments about poor coyotes there. Of course, I understand the dangers, but I also understand they have a right to live too. But I love the desert. All along, I've really loved the desert. This is Death Valley. And this is my happy place, Death Valley, Dante's View. Here we love coyotes. And I also just love the incendiary names around Death Valley, like, you know, Hell's Gate, Devil's Cornfield, Funeral Mountains. Like I said, this is Dante's View. From this point, you can't see them in this photo. You could see the highest and the lowest at the same time. You could see Mount Whitney and the floor of Badwater Basin at the same time, about 100 miles apart as the crow flies. But what's with that small lens? I don't know too well how to use small lenses. I usually do wildlife. Iconic Zabriskie Point. Super blooms in Death Valley. I think this was 2005. Lots and lots of inspiration. I think this was the Golden Evening Primrose Rose, but I'm not sure. We have to ask a botanist. One thing about the desert and Death Valley and the whole Death Valley complex in particular is there's a high degree of endemism, meaning that a plant or animal or other species like a fungus will live there and nowhere else in the world. For a desert species, it's remarkable how big this Panamint daisy is, and it only lives in 2-3 tiny little canyons in the Panamint Mountains. And according to the California Native Plant Society, they list it as endangered. So I first started camping there in '99. You know how it is when you wake up at your campsite and you hear the sound of an owl, but it's really, you find your roadrunner. Campsite area. Collar lizard near Fall Canyon. Chuckwalla near Keen Wonder Mine. And of course, the best Death Valley wildlife of all, pupfish. This is the beautiful Salt Creek pupfish. People said, it's outside the water. It's in the water. I just used a polarizing filter. And the water is really, it's a tiny little fish and it's really shallow water. Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle. So I became hooked on pupfish, so to speak, very early on and started collecting pupfish sightings. I'd seen them in Saratoga Springs, Ash Meadows, Amargosa River, and I evenly got to see the critically endangered Devil's Hole pupfish. It's really, really blue, and it lives in an immeasurably deep and mysterious submerged underground cave. And you only know it's there because there's about a 10 by foot window in the Earth's crust looking down into that place. Nobody's ever found the bottom as far as I know. So now I'm basking in the afterglow of one of my Death Valley trips. And my friend Rusty Scalf, who is an amazing person, he teaches for Audubon. He also contributes to the Breeding Bird Atlas and basically does countless counts. And he asked, hey, did you get a chance on your way home or way there in Owens Valley to see the Owens pupfish? Because there was this biologist who rescued them in buckets, and without him, they'd surely be extinct. Well, I ran to my computer. I'm really curious about this story. And I immediately found the famous accounting of saving the pupfish, Species in a Bucket, written by, it should say written by the courageous fishery biologist himself, but it was written by Edwin Phil Pister himself, Phil. And I read it several times. Oopsie. I read it several times and really meditated on, I don't want to rewrite Phil's story. Phil told his story best, and I don't know if anybody should try and retell Phil's story in that way. But I thought for kids, yeah, there's so many lessons here for children. The fact that it's an endangered species, what is extinction, and the fact that he had to be brave when he was really needed, and he had to do it even though he was scared. That sort of do it anyway kind of attitude, like, he was scared, but he cared, and, he did it anyway. So I was trying to think of a good way to approach this story for children. And I realized that, well, first I've got to talk to Phil. So I know that his story was brave, but I had to be a little brave myself and write to this person that is a hero. So I looked him up in the white pages in Bishop, California, and I sent him a snail mail letter and just sort of wished for the best. 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a call on my phone from an unknown number, and I answer it. I'm calling for Elaine Bond. This is Phil Pister. It was unbelievable. It changed my life in just a second. And now my learning curve begins. I told Phil that I wanted to write a book for kids, but that my experience was with the University of California. In fact, one of his best friends, Roger Samuelson, was the retired or the director emeritus of the natural reserves. And I came on after he left. But my previous books specifically for children were for ages 4 and younger, and I both wrote and photographed them. And you can see that this is a 2-page spread here. So the text is very brief and fun. Some 2-page spreads have 1 word of text for the whole page turn.
These are some of her other books.
That's right. And I even got Death Valley in there. But I did really meditating. When I write a book, especially for kids, I kind of meditate on my intention. What do I want out of the book? And I never want to forget who I'm writing for. When you write for adults, you're writing, for us. But when you're writing for children, you're writing for children and adults, because sometimes the adults are reading to the children, or they're the ones buying the book for the children. Or, I'm an adult and I read kids' books. So these are some of the things that I had to think about. And some of them were challenges I had to sort out, and others were negative talk I actually got from other children's book authors who read early versions. I had to realize which came first, the Pupfish or the Pupfish Hero. There are co-stars in the book. People would always say, well, what's your lead? What's your hook? Is it the fish or is it Phil? Well, if you put Phil saved the fish, they don't know who Phil is yet. And like I kept telling myself, don't rewrite Species in a Bucket, make it different, tell different stories. And there were some complicated things, explaining to kids that there are fish in the desert, explaining that it happened in 1969, most likely before they were born. My key words were courage and compassion, bravery and big-heartedness. And here's some of the negative questions I'm sure you can see there. One of the most stark ones in my mind was when the children's author read the book and said, yeah, the writing's good and all that, but I just don't care about the fish. And I said, oh, well, not if they went extinct. She said, I don't really think people will be sad about something that's gone that they never even knew about. And she said, do you really think that people in another country, on another continent, will care if a little fish in California went extinct? And I said, yes. So for me, the solution to all these problems and to overcoming any challenge was empathy. And they live in very salty water, so it really is a solution. So now flash forward, it's been a couple weeks since our phone call, and I talked to Phil on the phone, and we go out to Fish Slough. Oh, first, I got to say, we met at his home there on East South Street, and I went in his famous backyard office. He had an outbuilding that was his office. And I looked at a bucket, and I said, is that one of the buckets? But remember, when he started his job, the the Owens pupfish were presumed extinct. So Phil had only seen them in papers and in photographs. So the fact that he had a photograph he took of Owens pupfish is amazing. Also, his stacks of books and other things. The Sand County Almanac, we talked about it at great length, and I actually read it myself after meeting Phil. So some of Fish Slough looks like this. Some of it looks like that. And close to the pupfish pools, it looks like that. So we're talking about a story that happened in near darkness in all these different types of habitats. And so it's a hot day, and Phil and I are having a talk out there. And a couple notes on Phil's personality, just from meeting him for a couple times, you know. First of all, he was a proud Golden Bear. He loved UC Berkeley. He would sign off emails, "Go Golden Bears." And I think that's one of the reasons he tolerated me, is because I did my undergrad there, and I also worked for UC. I also learned don't gush, you know. I kept wanting to find myself say, "Thank you so much for your heroic deed," or something like that. And he would just kind of go quiet for once. Like, those were the quiet times if I complimented him too much. So I tried not to do that. And he was also clever and funny. He wouldn't stop and tell a punchline and kind of chuckle, which is like the cue to most people to start laughing. His humor was more like oxymorons and turns of phrase and juxtapositions you wouldn't expect. He described other biologists of his day as blood and guts biology, meaning stocking waterways with sport fishes, you know, to feed, to hook and eat. Also talking about a conference. He told me this story more than once, how guys at a conference came in his office and he said, "You know, you have scientific journals in here. I thought you just have Field and Stream," you know, like it wasn't serious. So in addition to the bravery Phil showed that night, I got the distinct impression that to be an environmentalist in his day was brave. Another thing is the entire day, is it here? I can't remember the next slide, so I better just stay here. I recorded everything we talked about that day, and what Phil, you know, when you're interviewing somebody, you record them. And I had a little digital recorder in my cup holder. And if you've been to Fish Slough, you know there's a really bumpy washboard road, and it goes for at least 30 minutes each direction. And we're talking, you know, and I recorded everything. But to know Phil wasn't just a biologist, he was also a politician. He was also a pioneer. He was also a person who set lands aside for refuges and reserves and sanctuaries. And as a politician, was kind of funny with the rattle. Like I said, I transcribed everything. Unfortunately and fortunately, that whole part about Nixon, unintelligible. Didn't have to transcribe that part. Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay, one more thing I just want to mention is anybody who knows Phil, you know, I was asking him about retracing the steps. You know, you could see that there's scratchy shrubs out there. There's, you know, get your feet tangled in vegetation, holes, rocks, deep sand. In fact, we had to park quite a distance away from pupfish pools because I couldn't get my SUV through the deep sand. So, but one thing Phil did bring up is a famous question Phil is known for. And I didn't bring it up because I didn't think I could translate it properly for kids. But if anybody who knew Phil or knew about Phil's work could unmute, I would like us all to say Phil's question at the same time. And we could start by just saying, all right, his most famous question that Phil is known for. 1, 2, 3.
What good are you?
Good are little
What good are
fish.
you?
And with the answer,
What good are you?
what are you? And my niece calls that the zinger. I guess I did have fish hiding back here. I didn't mean to keep you on the fence so long. Okay. What good are you? My niece calls that the zinger. She's a freshman bioscientist at UCSC, where Phil's brother was actually the chancellor. And another highlight in my job as senior science writer was a very brief interview with Chancellor Pister. So here we go. The fish are ever present on my mind. I know the what good are you is a good point, because we're standing there and Phil is saying, yeah, I mean, if one of us were to sadly go, the people who know us and love us would be sad. But if an entire species is wiped off the planet, people all over are going to be sad. They're going to miss it. And I tried rewriting that for kids a number of times, and I couldn't get the what good are you to really work, and not feel the right tone for a children's book. And also it's in Species in a Bucket. So, one of my goals was to not rewrite Phil's own work. But one of the things that made me feel better was, I would talk about worrying about species, and Phil said, kids care automatically. They care. Kids automatically care. You're not going to have to, the nice thing about kids is you don't have to convince them to care about a cute little rascally fish this big. You're not going to have to talk them into it like you have to do with some people. One other really great point that was made up to me by an editor, Laura Atkins, who helped me with an early version of the book as well, was that kids want to know about other kids. And that makes all the sense, because if you know a kid's book, who solves the problem in the kid's book? A kid. They don't go to a parent to solve the problem. The hero in a kid's book always solves the problem, his or herself. So I went back to Phil and I asked him about his childhood. And he told me some stories. One was that he really, really loved any aspect of aquatic science, because he and his dad and his brother would hike up into the high country of Yosemite and go fishing together. And he loved being in the water. He loved the sound of the water, the coldness of this snowmelt water. And it gave him so much energy that when he went to UC Berkeley himself and studied under Ace Darker Leopold, Aldo Leopold's son, and environmental traditions here, he said that he'd be happy in any aspect of aquatic science. The fact that he became a fishery biologist was like winning the lottery. And there was one more important boyhood story that I included in the book, and that's the importance of being rescued. And I won't read that account in the book tonight just because of time. I want to save some time. But I just want to say that Phil knew about the importance of being rescued, in particular from water. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? Sorry. Kids care automatically. Okay, another thing, I went back to care and explaining to the children how scary it was. I talked before about the crux of the story with Phil was how brave he was, holding entire species in the palm of his hands in 2 buckets. All the living Owens pupfish on Earth were in those buckets. And whether they died out like the dinosaurs in the matter of minutes or got to live on was all on him that night, and it was getting dark out. And so I asked Phil, how did you feel carrying those buckets? We're standing at that fence in the heat, and I'm thinking about these pupfish. And they weren't even visible that day, but I'm thinking about them. And he said, I felt scared to death. And I'm all, okay, that's good. I mean, kids know fear, but that's in the article, and it's not, where's the heart? A lot of things are scary. So then I tried to break it down a second time. I said, Phil, what did you tell yourself when you were holding those buckets in your hand and the fate of the species? What did you tell yourself when you were taking those footsteps with these fish in your hands? He said, I didn't tell myself anything. I was scared. And I said, well, I tried to break it down. he said, well, I guess I just told myself, don't drop the buckets. You cannot drop the buckets. And I said, okay, that's good. That's good. There's an urgency there. And so I'm thinking about rewriting the zinger again. I'm thinking about other things. But then I realized I've got to be a little brave myself. And even though this is a giant in biology and a politician, you know, in that field, I've got to, like, maybe annoy him here and ask one more time. So here, this is the Pupfish view of the world. This is like looking south in the Owens Valley from the Pupfish point of view. And here's what I asked Phil. Just one more question, Phil. Okay, imagine a kid who knows something is really and truly important, critically important, and they want to do something to help, but they're scared. What would you tell that child? Okay, it was beautiful. We'll read it here in the book, but everything came together in that moment. I was worried with this learning curve that I wasn't going to be able to write this book about Phil, that I was going to fail. And when he said the words that are in the end of the book, it's like light came down. And now we've got the three elements. We've got the co-stars, the Pupfish and Phil and kids. And so now I think I'll read excerpts from the book. Oh, this is Death Valley, by the way, as well. Let me get out of this mode here of, I hope I'm not taking too much time. Let me find here's the hero. Okay, I thought about doing this full screen, but I found that you lose the 2-page view. So here's the Pupfish Hero. It was illustrated by Susan Greenleaf and published by ESIA, the Eastern Sierra Interpretive Association. And the Pupfish Hero who found bravery and buckets and saved a species. And here's the title page. I'd like to thank Altruza of the Eastern Sierra for contributing to making this book happen, as well as the Eastern Sierra Land Trust. Oh, and another thing I meant to say when I wanted to recognize all the people who were here in the waiting room, we've got educators here too, family, friends, colleagues of Phil's, other biologists, other creators, other writers, so thank you. I'm gonna zoom in just for a second here so we could read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which we sit, in which we call the Owens Valley, in English, the place of flowing water, on the traditional and indigenous lands of the native peoples of the, in English we say Paiute. We take this opportunity to offer gratitude for the ability to learn, work, and be a community on this land, and we offer thanks to the original caretakers of this region. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have been stewards of this land throughout the generations. Okay, I think this is about as zoomed in as it'll get. And here, of course, other pupfish need love too. Other pupfishes need love too, and there are several species in the Death Valley complex, all very, very rare, endangered, critically endangered. Okay, here I'll just begin by reading the intro. Tucked away among hot shifting sands and desert rock in the heart of California's Owens Valley, you might find some unlikely little animals. Fish. Every fish needs water, of course, and even in this dry, sun-scorched desert, water gently bubbles up from the ground in pools here and there across the land. Little fish live in these rare, precious waters, and they are as spirited as can be. They are called pupfish, Owens pupfish, because they frisk, frolic, and chase one another through the shallows like puppies when they play. I have to move you guys. You're over my, where I'm reading. Also in the desert, this is the backyard office in the Sand County Almanac is on his desk there. Also in the desert, there once lived a biologist who deeply cared about fish, even little fish. He respected them just the way they were and never worried, what good are little fish, as people often asked him. In fact, the diaries he kept, all about his life, were also about fish. The biologist's name was Edwin Phil Pister, rhymes with Easter. His friends called him Phil. We call him a hero. For one evening, when the pupfish really needed him, Phil became very, very brave. We're skipping ahead a couple episodes here, but here's what I referenced, fishing up in Yosemite with his dad and his brother. I'll just read the right-hand side. Phil felt the wild world waking up his senses. His toes tingled in the cold water, and his heart thumped as if in rhythm with the rushing stream. I'll skip ahead to another episode. Like I said, when Phil took his job in 68, 69, I have to check again the date, the Owens pupfish were presumed extinct. And two biologists, pioneers, Carl Hubbs and Robert Rush Miller, called him. It was a long distance call, and Phil made, point back then, long distance was an important call. Let's go looking for the pupfish. They found just a few, and Phil was there. Phil ran to the pups to see them for himself, and he was awestruck by their rare beauty. Some pupfish, older males in breeding condition, were flashy, bright, iridescent blue. The females and young males were brownish green with silvery bellies, smaller than 2 inches long, but equally dazzling and adorable. As the Owens pupfish darted past Phil's boots, his toes tingled and his heart thumped. He gazed into the water and made a promise. He would always keep these little guys safe. Phil had big responsibilities at his job, both in mountains and desert, and for the good of many different fishes. On the afternoon of August 18th, 1969, he came in from the heat to work on a much-needed plan to help another rare fish, the California golden trout, which was the official and magnificent freshwater fish of the state of California. He was deep in thought when fellow scientist Bob Brown burst in. Phil, we have to get out to fish slough. The pond is drying up. Phil knew exactly what that meant. If he did not get there immediately, Owens pupfish would be lost forever. The left side explains how so many plants grew. They were sucking up the water, and soon they're going to, the last and only home of the Owens pupfish is soon going to turn to mud. Panicked, Phil jumped into his truck and ran across the desert. Bob and another scientist, John Dienstad, came along to help. I got to move you again. I have a little row of nice, oh, there we go. I have a row of nice faces here. As fast as they could, the three biologists gathered all the pupfish into underwater cages and set them near the source of the spring, where fresh water bubbled up from the ground. The fish seemed calm and at peace, and everyone believed they would be safe here at least for several hours. Bob and John left on a dinner break. Phil stayed. He was alone in the desert for 2 hours before the sun set behind the jagged peaks of the Sierra Nevada. Finally, he felt it was time to leave. But before Phil hiked back to his truck, a small, worried voice spoke from a far corner of his mind, telling him to check one last time on the pupfish. He parted the stiff, rustling bulrush and peered into darkening water. His favorite fish were dying. Some were floating belly up, dead. Others were still living, but suffering. They flopped, floundered, and could not stay upright, and they suffocated and gasped for oxygen. Fish must breathe in order to live. Soon all would die. Phil figured out that even at the spring source, water lacked enough oxygen to keep fish alive, a terrible problem no one had predicted. Biologists are not trained for this kind of emergency. Phil knew that he was the only one there, and he had to rescue them now. But how and with what? His mind flashed on equipment in his truck, but because of the narrow dirt roads and fragile habitats, he had parked it 100 yards away from the fish. That's as far as a football field. Phil sprinted over to his truck and grabbed everything, a dip net, air pumps, and 2 big buckets. Then he dashed back to the spring and scooped and scooped. Phil's heart pounded and knees felt weak, but he caught them all. About 800 little fish were swimming in his buckets, every Owens pupfish in the world. Next, he remembered a deep pool, safe water, on the far side of Fish Slough. If he could just manage to get the pupfish to his truck, then he could drive them there. Phil lifted the buckets and was shocked by how heavy they were. Between the fish themselves, their water, and air pumps, each bucket weighed more than 30 pounds. Carrying both was like trying to lug 4 heavy bowling balls at the same time. Faced with no choice, no more time, and forever consequences to his actions, Phil summoned every power he had. He gripped those handles, tense and tight, lifted from his shaking knees, and headed off across the desert, holding fish. He took 1 step, 2 steps. Water and precious fish sloshed with every footfall. Rocks, deep sand, and dry, scratchy shrubs posed random hazards everywhere. A stray piece of barbed wire might have snagged Phil's boots. A rabbit hole may have caused him to twist an ankle. Still, he had 90 more yards of this. Phil knew if he were to lose his footing, even just slightly, he would drop the buckets and spill the little guys, and the world would lose them all forever. Owen's pupfish would go extinct, as gone as the dinosaurs on the desert sand at his feet. Phil told himself over and over, do not drop the buckets. You cannot drop the buckets. He was beyond anxious and worried. He was scared. So how did he find the strength and the deep courage he never knew he had to carry those 800 helpless little fish? He poured his whole heart into the pupfish's tiny swishing tails and fluttering fins, and he thought as if he was one of them. And this is the quote I was talking about. If you were in a bucket and about to become extinct, wouldn't you want someone to save you? Finally, Phil made it to his truck and he drove across Fish Slough to set the little guys free. Glinting in the moonlight, pupfish slid one by one into clear, warm, oxygenated water. Phil gazed up at the twinkling river of stars, the Milky Way, and he looked down into the water, just like the day he made his promise to the pupfish. He watched them swim around his boots, those rare natural wonders, hundreds of spirited little fish, shimmering and swishing and chasing one another like puppies. Today, tucked away among hot, shifting sands and desert rock in the heart of the Owens Valley, you might find Owens pupfish, nearly 10,000 of them, enough to fill 25 buckets. Only because of Phil, these pups are here today, in existence, not extinction. But still, they are endangered and face serious risks that could cause them to die out and vanish. Scientists are closely looking after them, as Phil always did. Every single day, as Phil worked for the good of fishes and nature, he stopped what he was doing, pulled a diary out of his pocket, and wrote about his life and about fish. His words came to fill 71 diaries, one for every year he was a biologist. He got home late from work that evening after rescuing the Owens pupfish hours before they would have gone extinct. He reflected on everything that happened that fateful day and jotted it down in his diary the way he saw it. Humble as ever, Phil wrote just one line, that he had transplanted pupfish at Fish Slough and bought batteries for $2. Here is some of the back matter in the book. Other pupfish species need love too. Nick Buckmaster on the left here, on the right, is the current fisheries manager, district manager for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And in the blue shirt on the left was Phil's successor, Steve Parmenter. Very, very helpful in writing this book. If Steve's here, I really owe him a debt of gratitude. A little bit more about pupfish here. And for anybody who wants to see Phil explain the story in his own words, in the bibliography, there are these QR codes, and that take you right to YouTube. And his oral history is with the Bancroft Library, University of California at Berkeley. Golden bears. Here's the back cover of the book with the map, a little bit of the area. I just have a couple more little quick things to share here. Back to the slideshow. Okay. Fish Slough. We talked about Friends of Fish Slough, which is wonderful. I'm glad to hear that a new group is being founded in honor of this. Phil was for habitats for all. Everybody needs a safe, clean place to live. And so Phil did help establish a number of reserves, refuges, sanctuaries, areas of critical environmental concern. These are ecosystems. There are a lot of different plants and animals there. So Fish Slough is a marvelous ecosystem. Here's it looks like a red tail here. This was that rock panel toward the end of the road there. Also, Fish Slough is an important area of cultural importance. Not only does everybody need a safe place to live, but we all come from somewhere. And I think it was mentioned before about the Friends of Fish Slough. There's going to be an Earth Day celebration in Bishop, California. I thought it was April 22nd. I know Earth Day is the 20th. I'm a little confused about it, but I do know Friends of Fish Slough and the publisher of this book are going to have tables next to one another. They'll be selling books and auctioning some signed copies for the good of Fish Slough. The cutest pupfish of all. This is my niece, who coined the author of the Zinger. She's an amazing young lady. I mentioned she's a new fighting banana slug at UC Santa Cruz. She designed and knitted this pupfish herself and surprised me on the holidays. Remember, Phil said that you don't have to convince kids to care. Kids automatically care. She's a young lady now, but please remember, she saw me work on this for quite a long time, and she was a kid when I started this book. Finally, just one last story about Phil. We're driving around the roads here at Fish Slough, and you know, I think that's looking toward the south and west, but I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly from this photo. But on to the west is the Sierra Nevada. To the east are the White Mountains, and in particular, White Mountain. It's a 14er. There are a number of 14ers in California. And all day, that day I recorded my talk with Phil and we toured the reserve, and I got to imagine what it might be like for him in that treacherous environment, getting dark out. I got the sense that White Mountain was a special place for him. It seemed like the zenith of wonder for him. Spirit, it was his comfort zone. He talked about White Mountain like it was his friend. So at the end of the day, I wanted to take a picture of Phil. And I thought, well, where should we put White Mountain? Because we kept our eye on White Mountain all day. And we decided, where shall we stand you, Phil? And he said, we angled it so that White Mountain was looking over his shoulder. It's silent giant. That's the Pupfish Hero, Phil Pister. May his memory be for a blessing. Thank you, everybody who joined me tonight, and thank you for hosting Mono Basin Historical Society. It's my understanding that they'll be carrying the book when their museum in Lee Vining reopens seasonally in May. And there's a little bit more where you can get it. But anyway, I just wanted to stop. I wanted to end with Phil. So that's the talk.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, this
Do
is
you have any
Rich Corey.
questions?
Hello, Elaine, how about stopping your screen share and we'll get
sorry about
anybody
that.
who
Yeah.
wishes to ask a question.
There we go. There we go. Oh, I could see the people who are here. Oh my goodness.
And if you wish to ask a question of Elaine, go ahead and unmute and even start your video. And if you can't, say something in the chat and I'll see if I can do something from this end.
West Virginia's here, my dear friend. We have a reserve manager from UC Santa Cruz.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
So fabulous book. Thank you so much for this. So that picture of Phil was it looks like it was at Northeast Spring. Is that where he brought the pupfish when he saved them from wherever it was going dry? Or do you know?
Yeah, I took that picture. I think that was the correct spring. The rediscovery site is kind of undisclosed as far as I know. I read the recovery plan for the Owens pupfish, and they described the different places they translocated the fish. Imagine, don't put all your eggs in one basket, don't put all your pupfish in the same pool. So when they were first rediscovered, they spend some time spreading them out into 5 or 6 different pools. What I kind of didn't get to at the beginning of the book here with this excerpted reading was that by the time that hot day in August, one of the hottest days of the year, and the pool was drying up, they had died out in all the pools but one, and it was one where they moved the fish.
Wow.
So they would have gone extinct if they hadn't been rediscovered.
Thank you so much.
Elaine, if I might.
Yes.
I'm Frank Baldwin, and with Roger Samuelson, who you mentioned earlier. We were backpack buddies with Phil for 20 years until his death. And I just wanted to mention that at SNARL, the Sierra Nevada Aquatic Research Laboratory, a research library room has been established with hundreds of his books, and all of those daily journals that you mentioned are there, as well as we're starting, thanks to the University of Cal at Santa Barbara, we're beginning to process Carl's some 25,000 slides that he took, most of them aerial photographs of the Eastern Sierra, which will be a priceless resource for people who want to know more about the Eastern Sierra. So terrific book. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you, Frank. I had the pleasure of going to Snarl for the first time. I'd written about it in the past, but I hadn't had the pleasure of visiting. I wish it were under better circumstances, but I'm glad that Snarl is the depository for a lot of his materials.
Elaine?
Yes.
Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Hi. You, my dear, are a treasure.
Oh.
And this was wonderful. And I look forward to your next visit.
Thank you, dear. It's my friend Richard. He leads a lot of bird activities and bird education in Morro Bay.
And pinnacles.
And that's right, pinnacles. In fact, we first met, our friend Rusty, who I mentioned, hooked me up with Richard because he is a volunteer with the California Condor. So I got to shadow Richard, and also in one of my books, Running Wild, I've got the California Condor and I've got her flying with a vulture side by side.
So if I can jump in, I see JB has her hand up. What my question is, or my suggestion is if you have a copy of the book with you, could we see the book so people get a visual of what we're talking about? It's not a 300-page book. It's not a...
No. I'm sorry. They're over there. I'll be right back. I should have.
Okay.
Oops.
I had my own copy, but we gave it away to a neighbor girl.
Oh boy.
It found a good home.
Well, this is embarrassing. I have one here.
That's okay.
I mailed them all out. I have a box of them over there. Do we have a moment for me to open the box? Or they're about this big and they're 48 pages. It's a standard picture book size and they're 48 pages. It's got a beautiful glossy cover and is embossed.
Yes. Okay.
There, my friend Emily has one. Emily in Oregon.
JB had a question, I think.
Yes. Sorry, Em. Oh, there's a copy. Oh, wow, people have copies.
Yeah,
yes,
good.
JB. Nice, thank you.
I have a copy, but it won't let me show it with my...
Oh, my mom has a copy. Okay. Yeah, I mailed them all out. But I just got a shipment. And all right, there's my mom with one.
Well,
JB's question. Okay.
My comment, and maybe a question, as I was looking through the book, it struck me this would make a wonderful coloring book.
Oh,
How does one go about doing that if you wish?
I don't know. That would be a good, if anybody has suggestions or leads to people who do coloring books, I guess probably contact the illustrator and the publisher as a start.
Well, I'd want your words as captions too.
Oh, I see. Do it like as line drawings, and then the kids color in the entire story, and then it gets darker and darker, and then it's night at the end. That would be a lot of fun.
Would I talk to Isia? May I pursue this?
Oh, sure. I'm not proprietary about information. The more the merrier, the more ways to inspire kids and save pupfish. Are there any more questions? I see the next screens in my mind here are all blackened out, so I can't see people.
So I will jump in again as
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
the
I
host
don't know
for
where the chat box is. Okay.
Cole, as our president of the Historical Society, may want to wrap things up, but I
Yes.
just wanted to thank you. We several, I wish I could remember exactly how many years ago, of course, before Phil died, he came and spoke to the Historical Society at one of these meetings. He was our presenter that night. And of course, he's been a hero of mine for many years. And that was just a wonderful memory for those of us who were, members of the Historical Society and were there that night to remember that. So, Cole, do you have anything else you want to close?
Well, I just wanted to thank Elaine again and remind everybody that the next meeting will not have a potluck because it's a Zoom meeting, and it will be Kate Mook speaking on missing and murdered Indigenous women and boarding school runaways. So that'll be on Zoom, and thank you all for coming. And I guess that's the evening.
I have a suggestion.
Oh, Jenny.
Yeah, I bought a couple copies of the book at Spellbinder and some at the visitor center here in Mammoth, and I gave 2 copies to the Mammoth Elementary School library and 1 to the Mammoth Elementary School science teacher. And I think if we can get people are willing to donate a book or 2 to your local elementary school, that would be fantastic.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Yes, we have a number of educators and important outreach people here, not just pupfish, but other species as well. Does Betsy have a question or? Oh, that's at the, okay.
We also have some librarians, at least one, or I don't know how many that are in here in this group tonight. So they need to be ordering from Isia, I guess is the source,
right,
or whatever source they use. It's on Amazon too, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah, I ask that question often. I've inquired that as well. Currently, it's only available online through Isia, but I'm finding that the feedback I'm getting is that it's very difficult to find. And I think they're doing research, but you can always go to my website, and I have a link to the Isia, and also if hopefully it'll be available in other mainstream outlets, I will put that on my site as well. So I have a buy it link or whatever on my site. So
okay, good. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everybody who was here and the opportunity.
Well, thank you.
Good night.
Good night.